reverse that advice to Queen Elizabeth II, or whether they will simply leave it be, given this has already taken place. A lot of critics of Boris Johnson saying that if his advice is found by the Supreme Court to be unlawful, then he should resign. And his own Solicitor General, Robert Buckman, speaking to Sky News just a few minutes ago, saying that the government would honour whatever the Supreme Court's decision was about the prorogation or suspension of Parliament, and that could, in theory, mean that Parliament would be recalled before that October 14th date, where it's currently suspended until.
Willem, thank you very much indeed for that. I think a very clear explanation of why the stakes are relatively high around this important meeting. Jerry Thomas is with us, Head of Global Equities at Saracen and Partners. Just in passing, Jerry, where do UK equities fit into the mix of stocks that you own at the moment?
UK equity is quite a small part of the overall global indices, sort of 5%, so 2 or 3% of global GDP. Having travelled around the world fairly recently, most overseas investors look at the UK and Brexit as somewhat of a sideshow and a little bit of an embarrassment for us that are travelling under the British flag. We do have some UK companies in the portfolio. Mostly they're multinationals. They'd be a company like Compass Group, for example, where a very small amount of what they do actually is in the UK. They just happen to be listed here. There's always that difference between where companies are listed and where they actually do business. In our dividend funds, UK companies play quite a good role. Market's quite high yielding. And when you look at the tax treatment on withholding tax of the dividends that we receive, that's zero in the UK, gives us some benefit.
We have a good spread of oil-related companies listed in London and oil services businesses. Obviously, the recent action that we've seen in Saudi Arabia has generated this spike in the price, and people are having another look at these stocks. How do you feel about where they currently sit on valuations and whether you're interested in revisiting some of them?
We take a long-term view and think pretty hard about whether these companies that are still putting 90% or so of their capex into oil and gas assets, producing oil into the future, which may be less required. We worry about stranded assets. We worry about the sustainability of the dividends in a lower oil price. I think the impact in Saudi is a temporary geopolitical issue. I think we've seen that the oil price is much calmer today. Most of that capacity will come back on within 2 or 3 months, I suspect. At least half of it will come back on quite quickly. I think, into an oversupplied market, this was a shock. Most investors were underweight oil or concerned about the future for oil. I think those concerns come back, and I don't think the companies are particularly attractive on a long-term view.
Any appetite for any, let's say, alternatives in that space? Any appetite at all for the sector, or just shying away
for
from
us,
it
the
altogether?
utility sector and the right utility companies are really the new energy companies. So Ørsted's been an important investment for us for quite some time, successfully. Enel, listed in Italy, also becoming more of a renewables business. NextEra in the US. And there are other companies in Europe, RWE is becoming more interesting. So I think that's really, as the global economy becomes electrified, what that source of electricity is will change, but the distribution and selling of electricity will still be a very important market. Wind is a good industry.
Excellent. Jerry, nice to see you, sir. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Jerry Thomas, who is Head of Global Equities at Saracen and Partners. Tell you what's coming up on the show. President Trump says it looks like Iran was behind the attacks in Saudi Arabia, but steps back from military action. Plus, we'll delve into the impact of the Saudi attack on global commodities when we exclusively speak to the executive chairman of EM Plus Group. That's coming up next.
The landscape of media distribution is always...
Sunday's NFL Network has you covered from morning to night. It all starts with Game Day Morning, breaking down every matchup before kickoff.
It's going to be a great game.
Then Game Day Live brings you up to the minute scores.
Getting fired up here.
Game Day Highlights catches you up on Sunday's biggest plays with extensive recaps.
What a crazy finish it was.
And Deion Sanders wraps it all up in style on Game Day Prime.
If you ball, you get the call.
NFL Game Day, Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern, only on NFL Network, and listen on TuneIn.
Fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying all in one place.
Carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
Moving from one rental home to another is so expensive.
Last time, we had to pay hundreds to move in, the first month's rent,
and then a big deposit.
With Romans, it doesn't have to be like this.
It doesn't?
At Romans, you really can move in from just £36, plus your first month's rent.
And that's it?
Nothing more to add. Move in from just £36, plus your first month's rent, with Romans.
No deposit.
No problem.
Romans, your trusted local property experts at romans.co.uk. Conditions and monthly fee apply.
For people who want to feel happier, stronger, fitter, get further, faster, better. For people who want to, but don't always manage to. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it with. It matters that you want to. Virgin Active. We'll find a way for you. Join in September and get 15% off each month on 12-month memberships. Visit virginactive.co.uk. Participating gyms. Terms and conditions apply.
At Jet2 Holidays, we offer you the full package. Flights, transfers, accommodation, and 22 kilograms of baggage included. But that's not all. We also give you peace of mind because we've been named a Which recommended provider for package holidays. Jet2 Holidays. Package holidays you can trust. APTA and ATOL protected.
Trimming gains after Brent has its best day in history following an attack on Saudi Arabia's oil supply. President Trump points the finger at Iran but says he's in no rush to respond.
We have the best equipment in the world. We have the best missiles. And as you say, you just bought the Patriot system. There's nothing even close. No, I don't want war with anybody, but we're prepared more than anybody.
Oil and gas stocks continuing to power higher, outperforming broader European equities, which tread water amid ongoing geopolitical concerns. Investors await the Fed's latest interest rate decision as President Trump ratchets up the pressure on Chair Jerome Powell following the recent oil shock. And the UK Supreme Court prepares to hear claims that Boris Johnson's Parliament suspension is illegal after a bruising trip to Luxembourg where a press conference goes awry amid a chorus of boos.
Stock markets here in Europe have been open for half an hour so far, and we have improved on some of the core markets. Green marching onto the FTSE, up about 0.1%, and going with it the French market now. So a slightly better position on some of these markets as again we watch a little bit of risk off, a little bit like yesterday as we saw reaction to the Saudi attacks. Most parts of the market are trading weaker. A day for the defensives to be back in favour, relatively speaking, and very much still a strong trade around some of those energy stocks. We're witnessing that again at the start of this trading session. Let's delve into the individual sectors and you can see how it plays out. Oil and gas has been the top of these charts this morning as we've been moving through the session. You can see still up 1% currently. Very strong healthcare, utilities, food and drink. A lot of bond proxies starting to form up on this part of the charts. What we've got investors very much eyeing the Saudi Arabia progression, how long it's going to take for production to be restored, but also around the Fed meeting as it begins its two-day meeting. We are expected to see an interest rate cut of 25 basis points. So one to watch, a big risk event for markets in the next 24 hours. In terms of the individual stocks, let's just take a look at a couple of big names. Novo Nordisk, it's been talking about its amount of supplies it's got in the UK coming up to Brexit, 2% higher for that stock. You'll notice a number of big oil names still marching to the top end of this chart, from Aker to Total in France, 1.7% in the green. Stocks that are moving south. The likes of Zalando, as its major shareholder, reduces its holding in the online e-commerce player. The stock currently down a fairly mighty 10%. Let's get into some of those big oil majors, and you can see how they are forming up 1% on BP. So better trade that we've got now than where we started out the trade of the session. But don't forget WTI is down 1%, and we've got Brent off 0.5%. So in contrast to a little bit of give back on those spot prices, we've still got energy stocks moving very firmly into the green. Airline stocks, by contrast, those concerns very quickly came into the market yesterday on the back of the spike that we saw in oil prices, that airlines might be contending with a much larger fuel bill. And this morning, morning, it is still impacting the fortunes of some of the budget ones in particular. You can see EasyJet and Ryanair right at the bottom of the boards. Air France was a stock that was hit yesterday, and you can see some of the legacy carriers all trading down roughly 1%. The exception here is really around Wizz Air. Jeff.
Karen, thank you. Crude prices pairing gains following Monday's surge. Brent posted its best day on record after an attack on Saudi Arabian oil facilities removed half of the kingdom's daily crude output. President Trump says it looks like Iran was behind the strike, while NBC News sources suggest American intelligence believes the attacks originated from Iran. A Saudi Arabian military official says Iranian weapons were used in the attacks, but didn't outright blame Tehran. President Trump has talked down the prospect of imminent military intervention.
Do I want war? I don't want war with anybody. I'm somebody that would like not to have war. We have the strongest military in the world. We've spent more than $1.5 trillion in the last short period of time on our military. Nobody's even come close. We have the best equipment in the world. We have the best missiles. And as you say, you just bought the Patriot system. There's nothing even close. No, I don't want war with anybody, but we're prepared more than anybody.
Let's get a seasoned eye on this as well from Lord Barker of Battle, Executive Chairman of EM Plus Group, joins us now. And Greg, we should say to people that you're the former Secretary of State for Energy. In fact, I think the first time I bumped into you was in a cloakroom in Davos after there'd been some debate on energy, which I'd taken part of. Well, what do you make of the current situation, the vulnerabilities of the global energy supply? And we'll obviously talk about aluminium and Russia in a little bit more detail in a bit.
Sure. Well, it proves we're not off oil and gas yet. We're still a carbon-dominated economy. We know that it's still a very volatile, dependent on a very volatile region. So the sooner that we can transition away from dependent on these regions of the world which are unstable and can come to home-produced, locally sourced, renewable energy, clean energy, the better for everyone, not just for the environment, but also for the geopolitics of the world.
Okay, that's interesting, because we talk about the energy transition story, and you, like me, you must be on so many mailing lists where you get an energy transition story in your inbox every single day. I mean, literally, that's what I'm getting at the moment, virtually. But the negative side of it could well be more Middle Eastern tension as they scramble for some form of revenue, scramble to prop up the current regimes, whatever side of the spectrum they're on. There could be some serious geopolitical ramifications of that transition, couldn't there?
I think it's hard to blame what's happening in the Middle East on the shift to renewable energy. I mean, I think there are much bigger currents swirling there, religious, territorial, historic. So I think we should focus on the really positive things that we can do, which is embrace the rapidly cheaper and more available sources of clean energy. And we've got to do it because, climate change, that is a massive driver of instability. Some people have even said it played a role in the initial causes of the fighting in Syria because of the unprecedented droughts there. It's very difficult to prove any of that, but what is clear, climate instability is a driver of geopolitical instability. So we must do everything we can to avert dangerous man-made climate change, and we can do that if we embrace clean energy and a more circular economy.
Okay. Do you have a view on US foreign policy at this point? Because you've been very instrumental, though, in getting EM Plus.
No, I don't.
Well, go down the road with me, because you were very instrumental in getting EM Plus off the sanctions list, as those Russian sanctions were all dominant and having a huge bearing on that company. What we're facing now is Iran, whether it couldn't find its way out of a sanctions regime. And it seemed like last week with the departure of Bolton that perhaps there was a glimmer of hope. Now we've had these Saudi attacks and Iran's been implicated by various US officials. Do you see this going in any better direction from here, or is it a clear negative now that,
I don't know. That's way above my pay grade. The reason that we were able to avoid US sanctions is because we embraced comprehensive corporate governance transformation of our business, unprecedented transparency, and really put our company on a footing which moved it away from being an oligarch-controlled business to one with a strong, diverse institutional shareholder base. So we've embraced reform. Maybe there's a message there for Iran.
It's been an incredible transformation for EN Plus, and in particular, a huge deal that you inked with Brady Industries, Greenfield's project in the United States. But since we've all been having that discussion and the launch on the New York Stock Exchange, there's been a lot of heat from the White House about how this even progressed to this point, where you now have a Russian company embedded into a US supply chain. What do you make of that noise from Washington?
Well, I mean, there are politics in Washington, and clearly there were some voices that weren't happy with a decision made by the Treasury, but it was actually made by professional civil servants. We've steered well away from politics, and in actual fact, our group has been the second largest supplier of aluminium to the North American market for decades. So this wasn't a new departure. What we are doing, though, is linking our new smelter from Siberia, which is going to be one of the cleanest and most efficient producers of aluminium in the world, probably the cleanest, the lowest carbon, and linking that to the new rolling mill in Kentucky that's going to be supplying a large part of the new electric vehicle market. That's the thing. We are looking at global supply chain. If you want electric vehicles, if you want building materials that are going to help build the energy efficient houses of the future, if you want packaging that's sustainable, that will avoid using plastics that end up in ocean, you need clean aluminium, and there are only a few sources of that, and we are the largest provider, the largest producer of low carbon aluminium in the world, and we need other producers to follow in our wake, because we want a market in this. We don't just want a niche. And so that's why I'm going to the UN next week for the UN Climate Summit, to make it very clear that the sector as a whole, the aluminium sector, has to come with us on this journey to a net zero future.
Totally understand some of the green ambitions of your company, and working with US industry on that and providing jobs to a part of the world that desperately needs jobs. However, that said, coming up to a US presidential election, do you see your story become politicized, whether it's by the Democrats or someone else involved in politics locally?
I think actually, if you look at the news stories over the last few months, as things have settled down, it's become clear that our investment is exactly what it says on the tin, and we really have done our best to stay out of politics. But we are focusing very much, as you said, on the green agenda, and hopefully that green agenda, that agreement to act on climate change, is something that is cross-party. That's the great thing about the climate agenda here. When I was in government under David Cameron, we went out of our way to make sure that was a cross-party effort. A lot of the reforms that we built on were put in place by Tony Blair's government. They were taken forward by the coalition. Boris Johnson, actually, Theresa May, they remain committed to this green agenda. I'd love to see that elsewhere, and certainly if I had one piece of advice for other economies, it's try and make that climate agenda bipartisan, because everyone's future is at stake.
Given that people credit you with negotiating EN Plus away from the sanctions that the US administration placed on the business, and that you have tremendous skills in schmoozing the Americans to relieve the political pressure, do you think it would be a retrograde step if VTB sells its holding to the Chinese? Because that could just inflame the ire of the Americans again.
Let's be clear. You can't schmooze the Trump White House. You can't schmooze the US Treasury. The only reason that we were removed from the sanctions list was because of the fundamental corporate governance reforms that we put in place and the changes in ownership that took place, and putting in place a thoroughly first-class independent board. That is the beginning and end of it. As nice as it would be to think that I could schmooze my way out of it, that wasn't the case. In terms of diversifying our shareholder base, I think, I don't know any more about that story than you do. That's a matter for shareholders. It's been reported in the FT, I think it was. Yeah. I've heard nothing more. It may or may not come to anything, so it wouldn't be really appropriate to comment.
Would you be against the idea that the Chinese own a quarter of the company that you represent here, given how difficult the trade war negotiation is at the moment?
A diverse international shareholder base, I think, in principle, is a good thing for a big business like ours. But we want to see an open, liquid N+ with a strong quote here in London.
Can I ask you, just while you're with us, about Brexit, because you're in a position where you can actually talk freely now, I think. Do you think Boris Johnson has a cat in hell's chance of knitting together a deal before the 31st of October to take this country out of the EU?
Well, I hope so, because I agree with many of my former colleagues that a no deal would be very, very difficult indeed. I have to take Boris on face value. They say that they are working. I hope that they are. I worked with Boris, actually. I chaired the London Sustainable Development Commission for him when he was mayor, after I'd stepped down from government. And I don't agree with him fundamentally on Europe, but I always found him very straightforward to deal with. So, I'm like the rest of the population, keeping my fingers crossed.
Well, I mean, I can only add to echo that there is also on the European side, as maybe representing that, a big hope that we can get it done. I don't have any experience with Boris Johnson personally and how he does business, but I must say that, as expressed earlier, I think there is very little to go on, that we're actually progressing. And I also think that we should not underestimate the European stance here. They will not give in easily. And the fact that in the end, the damage is bigger for the UK.
There's going to be a trade deal at some stage between Europe and the United Kingdom to get het up on a backstop that nobody wants. It seems absolutely bonkers and a failure of diplomacy, isn't it, Greg?
It would seem strange. I mean, I think most people would be challenged to actually really give you a detailed explanation of what the backstop is.
Well, and why would
it seems to be holding everything up. So
and I think you also have to realize that this claim that the backstop or any other type of agreement would give up, sort of their sovereignty. Any trade deal partially gives up sovereignty because you agree on how you do trade and on what conditions. So
I think what we need is compromise and on both sides. I think everybody's got to look again at those red lines and understand that yes, we're coming out of Europe, but we do need to compromise.
But fundamentally, there is an issue of a hard border, and if we are not a member of the EU, then it does matter, doesn't it? That there is a hard border around this country.
I've never been.
This country includes Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
But you don't understand.
I've never been understand the way around that, but I hope that the other people who are looking at this more closely than I am do.
Of course, it won't escape, we've got to leave it there, but it won't escape everyone's notice as I say goodbye to Lord Barker of Battle that you're celebrating in your title the last time we had a successful European invasion in the United Kingdom.
Yes, it's been 1,000 years.
Of course, commemorating the Battle of Hastings, of course.
Yeah, exactly, Battle of Hastings.
You're celebrating a very European event.
As Priti Patel said, that things have moved on since then.
You wouldn't think so, would you? Lord Barker of Battle, thank you very much. It's a great part of the country if anyone wants to go down there, actually. Executive Chairman of EM Plus as well. Thank you very much indeed for that. Karen.
We've got US futures to show you as we count down to the start of the Fed meeting. Big risk event for many investors. As we also weigh up implications of any oil shock after the events in Saudi Arabia over the weekend. And you can see negative signals on the boards.
Everyone on the show is a professional trader. We put our money where our mouth is.
Sunday's NFL Network has you covered from morning to night. It all starts with Game Day Morning, breaking down every matchup before kickoff.
It's going to be a great game.
Then Game Day Live brings you up to the minute scores.
Getting fired up here.
Game Day Highlights catches you up on Sunday's biggest plays with extensive recaps.
What a crazy finish it was.
And Deion Sanders wraps it all up in style on Game Day Prime.
If you ball, you get the call.
NFL Game Day, Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern, only on NFL Network, and listen on TuneIn.
And fund my car from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
Moving from one rental home to another is so expensive.
Last time, we had to pay hundreds to move in, the first month's rent.
And then a big deposit.
With Romans, it doesn't have to be like this.
It doesn't.
At Romans, you really can move in from just £36, plus your first month's rent.
And that's it.
Nothing more to add. Move in from just £36, plus your first month's rent. With Romans.
No deposit.
No problem.
Romans, your trusted local property experts at romans.co.uk. Conditions and monthly fee apply.
We can't make the clock move any faster. We can't make your phone charge any quicker. And sorry, we can't speed up the traffic in Sutton Coldfield. But we can speed up the way you submit an energy meter reading. The British Gas app lets you book an engineer, as well as claim rewards and manage your accounts all within minutes. So you can spend less time running your home and more time enjoying it. Download the British Gas app today.
For people who want to feel happier, stronger, fitter, get further, faster, better. For people who want to, but don't always manage to. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it with. It matters that you want to. Virgin Active. We'll find a way for you. Join in September and get 15% off each month on 12-month memberships. Visit virginactive.co.uk. Participating gyms. Terms and conditions apply.
At Jet2.com, we love flying you to new places, like Provenza, with its beautiful Parga area and Lefkas Island, or Zadar, set along the dreamy Dalmatian coast. Book now and discover somewhere new for summer 2020. Jet2.com. Friendly low fares.
The IPO must go on. That's the view of WeWork parent, the We Company, which has told investors it will strive to go public by the end of the year. The message comes after the group abandoned its plans to list later this month amid concerns over corporate governance, funding and investor appetite. Reports suggest that WeWork's biggest financial backer, SoftBank, was prepared to buy up to $1 billion worth of shares to support the sale. However, the We Company was concerned it would still have missed its target of raising $3 billion. And for more on WeWork's on-again, off-again IPO, head to our website. That's cnbc.com. Donald Trump has hit out again at the Federal Reserve ahead of the central bank's two-day meeting. In a tweet, the US president questioned whether the Fed would get into the game following recent stimulus in China, saying, quote, "Dollar strongest ever, really bad for exports." He added, quote, "They can't believe how lucky they are that Jay Powell and the Fed don't have a clue," before concluding that a big interest rate drop and stimulus is needed.
Trump's interventions are among the factors set to overshadow the Fed's upcoming meeting. The central bank is expected to cut rates by 25 basis points, but investors will focus on the central bank's latest economic projections, changes to language and the number of dissenters. That's against a backdrop of an ongoing trade dispute with China and a surprise oil shock.
So many things that we could talk about here, but I know one thing that is close to your heart and you want to talk about this morning: sustainability and sustainability around investment strategy. Give us both barrels. Why is this going to work for our audience?
Well, I think we spoke a lot about it, both from a risk perspective, the implications that you need to be mindful of in corporate governance, which is also an angle of sustainability of your business model, and the transformation of the energy sector. But what is really important, simply for our clients, for investors, stepping aside from the benefits for the world or a more green environment or more sustainable ecology, is the fact that it's actually delivering returns. If you see what is happening in bond markets and in equity markets, you see actually that strategies that are more focused on the sustainability of business models, not only from a green perspective, but taking into account indeed corporate governance, thinking about other social conditions, are actually delivering better performances than general strategies. And I think that
structure, just understand absolutely what you're saying.
Sure.
Give us the nuts and bolts. What do I buy then to replicate that portfolio that you're describing?
So, for example, what do you buy in the fixed income market? One of the strongest growing elements of the fixed income market is the green bond market, which has been taking off over the last 3-4 years. It's a market now bigger than the European high yield market. It is exponentially growing, and it is delivering more attractive returns than traditional bond markets. On the equity side, if you think about exposure to European global equities, you see that actually the sustainable strategies that we run in that space are outperforming 4-5% year to date, and also for some of them that we've been running for 20